Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar. That's me.
And me.
And this week you're talking about Ashita no Joe from 2011. Now, I'm actually going to do a pause the podcast here. This is a manga that ran from 1968 to 1973.
Yep.
In Japan, everybody knows it.
Yes.
Everybody knows what... It was 20 volumes. Everybody knows what happens at the beginning and end. Actually, initially it was released as 23 volumes. They were smaller so that little kids could afford to buy them.
Amazing.
At the time. And so, in Japan, everybody knows about it. But as we mentioned at the end of last week's episode, they've only started publishing them in English last month.
Right.
So we got this huge volume that's like 2.5 volumes worth.
There are anime series, though.
Yes,
at least two.
Anime too, that's right.
And I think...
Those have been released in English.
Almost, surely, right? So I know that people, a certain category of people know about Tomorrow's Joe.
Right.
Like weeaboos, right?
Right.
So they've seen this anime or they just know about it from from a general fascination. Because, as you said, everybody knows this. It's so influential.
Yes. And even if you go on Wikipedia, it will give you the whole plot through the ending. We're not sure what quite happens on the final page.
Well, we can talk about that.
We'll talk about that, but that's all on the Wikipedia. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to read this and don't want to we're going to spoil it.
Oh yeah.
But it's kind of spoiled on the wiki.
If you're interested in Japanese popular culture, it's probably been spoiled for you already.
Yes, that's right. That's probably the best way to put it.
All right.
So as I mentioned, this came out in 1968 to 1973. It was in Weekly Shonen Magazine, which, I don't know, maybe aimed a little bit higher than Shonen Jump. I'm not quite sure. But it was as we mentioned, it's a boxing manga. It was a huge craze. People were crazy for it when it came out.
Yeah.
Written by Asao Takamori, who also created Tiger Mask, and drawn by Tetsuya Chiba. With a kind of, it's what we call Bigfoot cartooning. It's like very cartoony, but super energetic. I think when I read Volume 20, his art style changed. Now, he wasn't an amateur at this time. He had been in comics for about 10 years, so he wasn't new to it, but his art became tighter and like more atmospheric and just absolutely explosive by the end of it. And I'm not sure if he was saving that type of art for the actual boxing matches versus the brawls at the beginning, or if it was actually he did develop as an artist.
There's a massive difference between those early volumes and the final one, which wasn't obvious to me because I read all 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, it was an organic change.
Right.
And then doing just a little poking around, some research, I went back and looked at the earlier volumes, and like Joe is so much younger.
Yes.
In those, he's much shorter. His hair isn't as long.
That's right.
And by the end,
there's even a plot line where he has a growth spurt.
Yes,
and
he
he's
does.
having trouble staying at bantamweight.
He does. Yeah. But you're right. The art, the aesthetic changes enormously from start to finish.
Yeah.
And it whether it's because his technique improved, hard to say. I mean, as you said, he'd been working for many years by that point, or if it was just a deliberate choice. Either way, it's thematically appropriate.
Yes. And it seems like he didn't follow Takamori's instructions for the final pages as well, according to Wikipedia.
There's so much scuttlebutt about around these final pages.
Yeah. We'll get to that. So this edition just came out from Kodansha USA. Translation is by Asa Yoneda. It's an excellent translation. Okay, so it's about this drifter. He's maybe 15, 16. Well, we know he has a growth spurt later on. He's very young anyway.
Yes.
He's a bit of a cipher initially. We don't know anything about him. We don't know his background, where he came from, anything about his parents. And he shows up in kind of the Skid Row part of Tokyo.
Yep.
And he's walking through the park and he trips over this old dude sleeping on the ground with a patch over his eye.
Yes.
And crazy buck teeth. And this old guy gets into a fist fight with him because he kicked him, as he's walking through the park. Kicked the sleeping man. The old man gets up, and the old man's name is Dampei Tange.
Yes. And
he, as soon as he starts fighting this kid, Joe, that's been walking through the slum, he's like, whoa, you have the makings of a boxer, kid.
Yeah.
And we learned that Danpei was a boxer back in his day. That's how he lost his eye.
Yeah. He's scarred as well.
Yes.
He has stitches.
Yes.
Which he never loses.
Permanent cartoon icon stitches,
yes.
basically, to represent his scars. And some kids around the slums kind of gang up on Joe. I don't remember if there's any reason for that first time they ganged up on him. But then this little girl named Sachi, she might be like 5, is running away from these like actual gangsters. And she's stolen some food from them, and they're trying to beat up this little kid. And Joe gets involved with it. He's like, what's the matter with you guys beating a little kid? And he has this huge cartoony street ball where he beats the crap out of all these guys.
And Danpei is getting more and more excited.
Yes.
At the prospect of training Joe.
Yeah.
Of having found this this guy with so much potential.
Joe's like constantly like, get lost, leave me alone.
Over and over.
I don't care about boxing. Who cares about boxing? Go away. He won't leave him alone. So finally, he beats up this gang. They're called the Onihime gang. And then he tries to find a place to stay in this part of town, and nobody will allow him to stay there. They're worried he's going to rip them off or something like that. And so he has to sleep rough in the park where Tange is also staying. And then they get attacked by the Onihime gang again.
Yeah.
They come back to get revenge.
Yes. God, Yep. Yep.
And there's this huge brawl again. He's beating them up. It's basically him and Danpei versus all these guys. But then a patrol car starts approaching. I don't know what patrol car is doing in this part of town.
Yeah.
But
the script needed one to show up at this
exactly.
point.
So the gangsters run for it, and when the cops show up, they arrest Joe and Danpei. They end up going to jail. They get thrown in the slammer for a couple nights, and this is where Danpei tells his backstory in a flashback. He says he used to have a little boxing gym. He used to manage this boxer, but that boxer only cared about how he looked on TV for his girlfriend.
Yep.
He wouldn't follow the instructions that Danpei was giving him, and finally he quit.
Yep. And
after this, Danpei lost his gym, and he just kind of ended up drifting into this part of town, and now he lives here. He's homeless.
Yes.
And suddenly we cut to back in the slum, like the next day or 2 days later, whatever. Joe is actually training. So we don't know why he's been convinced, but later the neighborhood kids, these like Sachi and all the other kids, are all really cute. They like get all this stuff from Joe, like fun stuff like candies and stuff, and they figure that they learn from Joe that Joe still doesn't care about boxing. He just doesn't care one way or the other. But Danpei offered to pay him money, like a stipend.
Yeah.
Cover some of his meals and stuff and give him some pocket money if he would train. So he's like, okay, yeah, I'll do it for that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Danpei has gotten a job, like a real job.
He's working on the road crew.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's slaving away. He's doing double shifts.
Yep.
And meanwhile, Joe is taking his money and really only training when Danpei can see him.
That's right. Yes.
And spending the rest of the time spending the money on the kids and pursuing kind of schemes.
Yes, like he has a pachinko. He has a way to cheat at pachinko, and he wins. He's winning all this money.
He does.
And he's stealing stuff or getting kids to steal stuff, and he's reselling it on the street.
Yes, and he has one scam where he invites reporters to come to an office
big
building.
One. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he pretends that he has rescued orphans, or that he's going to build an orphanage.
And he says he's going to build a hospital, he's going to build an amusement park, he's going to gentrify this slum.
Yeah. But it's all
he says it's his big dream, but it's not. It's
just a dodge.
Yeah.
The reporters eat it up and publish it in the newspaper, and then plenty of people donate, including the wealthy heiress of the Shiraki Zaibatsu.
Yeah.
Called Yoko, who's the second most important character in the entire comic. But
we don't know that at this stage.
At this point, we don't know
We just know that he's got a bunch of money, but then he gets arrested for fraud.
Yeah, that's right.
And
so we'll take a step back, a few key things in your synopsis. One, this is at a time when parts of Tokyo are still poor.
Yeah.
So this is still in the post-war recovery period of Japanese history. So late 60s, Japan is certainly on the up there's been an enormous economic recovery in the wake of some of the Korean War and things like that, but there's still certainly a lot of poverty, and parts of Tokyo even are poor and run down and don't have running water and things like that. Second of all, Joe is not a very nice person.
Yep.
He is exploiting Danpei, essentially.
Yes.
Just pretending to train and taking his money.
And he's got all these rip-off schemes.
Yes. His sole redeeming feature, really, is that he's kind of nice to kids.
He's nice to kids, and I guess not redeeming feature, but one of his main characteristics is he won't stay down. He just keeps getting back up.
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But at the moment, Joe is not a nice guy. So he's not a typical underdog character in that he doesn't have a heart of gold. He's really doesn't have any redeeming features at this point.
It's interesting. His character, he's got, at
this point.
He's kind of gleeful about, fighting these guys. He's like, oh yeah, I'll fight all you gangsters.
He loves to fight.
He loves to fight, but sometimes he has a short temper. He will snap and fight people because he's angry, but most often he's got this huge smile on his face.
Yes. Yeah. He's utterly insolent, and he only cares about the present.
Yes, this is relevant to the title. He only cares about today. He doesn't care about tomorrow.
That's it.
To become a full person, he needs to become the Joe of tomorrow, so to speak. So Danpei had seen this newspaper article because his coworkers were like, wow, that guy is such a stand-up guy. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then he sees this newspaper article. So Joe is arrested. He manages to escape. Now he beats up all the cops, and the kids came in there and were throwing rocks at the cops well.
That's right.
So he managed to get away. So Danpei he's trying to convince Joe to turn himself in. He beats the shit out of him, basically. And then Joe gets thrown into jail. And Danpei's very upset about this. He has decided that Joe is his reason for a living. Now, we know that some period of time has passed. He's been training him with these, he's been sewing these, he's been making these makeshift punching bags, out of scraps and stuff. He's invested in this kid and believed that this kid was into it.
But Danpei is kind of using Joe as well.
Yes, or at least Joe says so for sure, that he just cares about, he's trying to recover, he's trying to live vicariously through Joe and recover his own old
And
glory.
also it's his ticket, it's sort of a meal ticket too, because Joe has the potential to be a phenomenal boxer, and then there will be wealth and prestige for the person that coaches him or is his manager. Both of those roles Danpei aspires to provide.
Yeah.
So, you feel sorry for Danpei because he's being taken advantage of by Joe, he's busting his hump out on the road crew, but also Danpei himself doesn't have the purest of intentions. And I think another theme of this manga is that no one is truly good.
Right.
Unusual in a shonen. Well, is this a shonen? That's
it's
tough.
good. We'll circle back around to that.
Certainly, no one really seems to be really good or bad. Oh well, no, I take that back. No one is. There are plenty of baddies, but no one seems really good.
Yeah, at least the accusations are flying against each other in a way that you have to question them. I don't know if we're supposed to be on Joe's side. Jumping way ahead, he accuses Yoko of being charitable just for her own benefit. And I'm not quite sure if that's true when he makes that accusation, but I don't know if the manga is saying side with Joe, he's the hero, so he says that he must be true, or if we're supposed to interpret that as him being making this accusation with no grounding.
He's just incredibly prickly.
Yes.
He'll say anything if he thinks it'll hurt them or get an edge over them or something like that. But who's to say? I mean, Yoko is an important character all through all of the books. She's always there. She's sort of a foil for Joe, really, more so than the boxers that he always faces and inevitably kind of defeats. But she's always there, kind of with her wealth, pulling the strings and manipulating Joe and people like Joe all the time. Yet she's always utterly calm, and she seems virtuous, but she does these underhanded things all the time.
Right.
She's sort of the villain of the piece.
Right.
But she never does anything overtly villainous. I mean, this book is popular, or was popular rather, with everybody in the early 70s. But especially with The left wing.
Oh, yeah.
Who we've discussed before
Yeah,
on this podcast when we're talking about Rose of Versailles.
Yeah.
But this was a very popular manga for the kind of very prominent left-wing student movement that was occurring at this time as Japan sort of became more wealthy and kind of questioned, and more kind of people became more politically engaged, and there were notions about what's the correct path, what's the right social system for Japan, etc., etc. And students especially were identified with Joe
Right.
as a kind of person who was rebelling against the system.
Right.
So from that point of view, you would look at Yoko and say, she represents, like capital.
Right.
She has all this wealth,
Yeah.
and she uses it to get her way.
Right. Did you also hear the story about Yukio Mishima?
I did hear about that. That's funny, isn't it? Because he's the exact opposite of a left-winger.
Yeah, so he like missed an issue. He was filming a movie and he missed an issue, and he came into the Kodansha offices and was like, I want this issue. And they're like, we don't sell issues here. Like, we'll send you one, but...
I can imagine him saying, do you know who I am? I'm Yukio Mishima!
Did you hear the Red Army story?
Yeah, you can't not find out about the Red Army story.
So the Red Army story is basically the Japanese Red Army, this terrorist group, hijacked a plane in 1970, a domestic flight.
Yep.
They wanted to go to Cuba to do training.
That's true.
And they were like, this we can't fly to Cuba. This is a domestic flight. We don't have fuel to do that. They're like, okay, fine. Fuel up, we'll go to North Korea. And they're still there. All those guys are still living there in North Korea.
That's
Most of them are still alive.
Yeah.
But anyway, when they had their katanas on the plane. This is the old days, I guess. You just
bring your katana on the plane. Yeah.
They pulled out their swords and they declared, "We are Ashita no Joe."
Yep. We are tomorrow's Joe.
Yeah. When they hijacked the plane. So this was in '70. This is before the series even finished. Both these incidents. Okay, so Joe's in jail. He's in his
1970. Yeah.
He's in his jail cell. He's bored out of his wits. Suddenly, a postcard pops through the slot. And
He's in solitary confinement because he's got in a big rumble.
Yeah, I think probably because he beat up all those cops.
Well, in this case, it's because he beat up Nishi and his gang. We don't really need to talk about Nishi.
This is... was that before or after? Okay, well, anyway. He's in solitary, right, and he gets this postcard through the slot, and the postcard is from Danpei, and it's got a boxing lesson on it.
For the sake of tomorrow, lesson 1.
Yes.
The jab.
Well, for tomorrow is what it's called in this translation, but I would say, so they've had some training together at this stage, right? He's been kind of training under the bridge with those makeshift sandbags.
Yeah. But he hasn't.
And now he's like, here's lesson number 1, the jab.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get some, he's like, I'm not going to do this, but he's bored, so he starts practicing it.
So first of all, he rips up the postcard, but then, because he's so bored because he's in solitary, he puts it back together and reads it, and then starts practicing, and he's like, whoa, this is some real Karate Kid kind of stuff?
The real Karate Kid stuff is later.
Yeah, sure. But this is part of the fun of these early volumes, is how is Danpei going to train Joe, who is so recalcitrant and reluctant to be trained because he's so listless and kind of like the floating man.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about anything. So Danpei is often tricking him into learning or giving him these postcards, and Joe's having to kind of figure it out on his own. The fun kind of these early volumes is that.
Yes. So actually, in my notes, he is moved into general population after this.
Yes.
And this is where he meets this guy, Nishi,
Yep.
and he's kind of running the gang in this jail, and they torture Joe, like they haze him with like jumping on his stomach. They have this paratrooper move, and some move called the twist, where they're twisting him around, whatever. He's beating them all up. They won't let him have food when the rations come in, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The cops drag Joe out of there. But this is a thing that happens throughout the series, is somehow the cops are strong enough to drag Joe away.
People are often strong enough to restrain Joe.
Yes, but he can beat up 20 guys easy, but the cops somehow are able to restrain him.
When Joe needs to be restrained,
Yes.
he can be restrained.
Yes. So now we get his trial. So this is where they're actually going to decide, because this is just like temporary, this jail situation.
Yeah, he's just in juvie.
We learned that his whereabouts are unknown. We learned that he's repeatedly run away from the orphanage. So these are the only details we really get about Joe. He is a total cipher for the reader to just be in there, or even a fantasy.
You can project.
What if I didn't have any parents? I could be Joe, something like that.
His background, unlike like Danpei's or other characters, his background isn't important. he has no purpose.
Yes.
He Cypher is a good word. He's opaque until he finds something to focus on.
Yeah.
He's utterly listless, a drifter. He only cares about his next meal. He's waiting for something to turn the key in the lock of his mysterious personality.
Yeah.
A bit like a bit like Alfred Bester's novel Tiger.
Right. Yep.
Gullyfoyle.
Yep.
Gullyfoyle is just a complete no one until his potential is unlocked.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So he is sentenced to 13 months in the Toko Special Reformatory.
Dun dun dun. This is a terrible place, apparently.
Yes, Nishi, the tough guy in jail, is like, holy shit, I'm scared of this place. I don't want to go there. You don't know how bad it is in there. He's really worried. They go there, but on the way, on the bus that's transporting them, they're like, we're going to try to escape. Nishi's telling Joe, we got to try to escape from this place. It's so bad. You have no idea. Joe doesn't care. He's like, it's going to be fine. What are you so worried about?
He doesn't care about the future.
Yeah.
Over and over, he doesn't care about the future.
Yes. In there, they're sleeping 20 to a room. He gets in a fight, I think, with all the guys in the room when he shows up. I'm pretty sure he usually just gets some fight. So with people, he gets more postcards in this location. Actually, they go out to do farm work. This is one of the things they have to do. And while they're at the farm, he gets a postcard. This guy, Rikishi, delivers a postcard. He's delivering the mail to everybody. And he just throws it on the ground. Yeah. He just throws it on the ground. Joe's like really angry at this guy for doing that. But they make Joe go into the pig pen to clean up the pig shit. And then this is all the gang, the local, the old guys, right? Not the new bloods, the old bloods. And they stoke these pigs to start attacking Joe and stuff. Yeah. Joe and Nishi are in there, but Nishi's like, hey, these pigs could actually break out of here. You should ride one, and that's how you can make your escape.
So bonkers.
It is one of many, a lot of cartoony stuff happens in these early volumes like this.
In the early volumes especially, yes.
So Joe gets on this pig, and it smashes through the pig pen, and he's
It's a stampede, essentially. There's a pig stampede.
Yes, that's right. He's stampeding towards the gate. He's going to make his getaway, but then Rikishi blocks his way, and then they have a big fight.
Well, Rikishi's amazing. So he's got this. He's got these flowing locks. He's got a very kind of 70s haircut.
Yeah.
He's got a lovely square jaw, and he always has. Is a stalk of wheat in his mouth often, which is the sign of a delinquent. But he. Essentially, when he sees the pigs stampeding towards the gate, everyone else gets out the way. But he stands squarely in front of the pigs.
Yeah.
He essentially ducks and weaves, uses boxing footwork to make his way through all of the pigs until he reaches the one that Joe is riding. Then he punches that pig in the face and knocks it out.
Yeah.
He then proceeds to punch the rest of the pigs in the face and knock the rest of them out too. This is plainly absurd.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not as absurd as what happens later.
Oh, indeed.
With Rikishi and animals, but it is crazy.
Yeah, but Joe's furious.
Yeah.
You know, he was almost out, but Rikishi's ruined his escape attempt because Rikishi wants to get out on good behaviour. It turns out he could do these magical things because he himself is a pro boxer.
He used to be a pro boxer, and he was disbarred for punching a heckler or something like that.
Well, he's gone to jail.
He's been suspended.
Because he punched a heckler.
Yes. Right.
His status is being a felon preclude you from boxing? I doubt it. But anyway, that's why he's in jail with Joe. Yeah. Anyway, so Joe's furious. He tries to throw down, he tries to punch out Rikishi, and he can't lay a hand on him.
Yeah.
And Joe's baffled because he's effortlessly dominated everybody he's fought, with the possible exception of Dunpei, up to this point, and he just cannot lay a fist on this guy. And then the guy just straight up lays him out. Rikishi knocks Joe on the ground. Joe's completely baffled. And that's when someone tells him, you picked a fight with him, don't you know he's a pro boxer?
Right. Now,
now Joe has a purpose.
Yes, he wants a rematch against this guy of some sort at this stage. So now, Dunpei and the kids are trying to visit Joe in jail, but they're not allowed to. It's family only or something like that. They won't allow it. But meanwhile, this woman, Yoko, shows up. Now, we had seen Yoko in the previous scene during the trial. She showed up to the trial because she was one of the people. She had donated 100,000 yen to his cause when she thought it was legit.
His fake
so
orphanage,
she's one of the people that was ripped off by him, and she sat in the audience of the trial. Nobody knew who she was. Now she shows up again. We learn a bit more about her. How her grandfather is some rich guy or whatever, and
she's an heiress. Her grandfather runs one of those enormous sprawling. It calls it a zaibatsu.
Yeah.
I think the zaibatsu had ceased to exist by the 60s, but essentially a massive company that owns all sorts of interests.
Yeah, it's a big kind of conglomerate. But
conglomerate is the word, yes.
So she has shown up with a student theater troupe, which would have been a big deal in Japan in the 60s. Like, this was when all this kind of student art scene was happening. But she's there to perform, like, as a charity at this reformatory.
She's very big on charity. Yeah.
Yes. And they're putting on a play of The Hunchback of Notre Dame with herself starring as Esmeralda. Joe sees this and thinks it's ridiculous, and he ridicules her out loud
about this.
and walks out. And Rikishi is highly offended that he insulted her while she was on stage and said those mean things about her. And this is where he says Joe confronts her and says, "You're only charitable for your own benefit."
Yeah.
He is not specific about why, in what way, or whatever.
Well, if we lean into the Marxist analysis, Marxism has a big problem with charity.
Right.
Because it's done by the propertied classes to give the bare minimum to the proletariat in order to maintain their ascendancy over them.
Right. So, because of this conflict, now Rikishi and Joe are about to fight again. But they put a stop to it, but Dampé steps in and says, "Why don't we have an official, like a boxing match?"
That's it.
And you can set up a whole tournament. All the different blocks of the reformatory can fight each other, and you can have a ladder.
The guards aren't interested in it at all. But then Yoko steps in and says, actually, there's been a lot of success in America with promoting sports, specifically boxing, as a way to kind of rehabilitate violent prisoners, to give them an outlet for their energies and to give them a goal to work towards. So she says, the Shiraki company will provide the gear and the ring, and we'll hold a boxing tournament in, 2 weeks or so. And everybody suddenly becomes boxing mad.
Yes. Yes.
But no one more so than Joe.
And they've got 1 week. He's got 1 week to train for this thing, which Dampé has asked for because he says, this kid's not a boxer, I need to train him. This is when he starts doing the real Mr. Miyagi stuff, where he's hoeing with one arm, and uprooting these plants with his bare hands instead of using tools. It's all stuff to make himself tougher. Dampé also teaches him a secret move, which we don't see. It is. It's number 3. Number 2 was the straight. Yeah.
The first was the jab. The second was the straight. Now he's taught him a secret move that we don't know what it is.
But he actually knocks him out. Teach him.
He knocks Joe out.
He knocks Joe out.
At this point, Dampé can still beat Joe up.
Yeah. Also, at this stage, they're about to. Oh, I think that he's knocked out. He's put it in the infirmary. Nishi's there with him. And he wakes up. He's like, "Nishi, let's box. I need to practice. I can't lie here." Nishi's like, "I'm not going to fight you." And he starts fighting Nishi, and Nishi's like not putting up fight. He's not serious about it. Joe is very angry about this. The cops show up in the room. They're like, "What are you doing? Lie down or go back to your cell or whatever." And he starts fighting the cops. They're like, "No, we're throwing you in solitary." He says, "Solitary? No way. I have to train. I've only got 5 days left." He jumps out from the second story window. He smashes through like something out of Die Hard. And beats up everybody on the grounds.
Everybody in the prison grounds. So dozens of people. We've got the guards running, following his trail of destruction.
Yes.
There are just bodies lying in a line, and then eventually they come to one of the exercise yards, and the exercise yards has about 50 people, all lying in a heap, and Joe kind of like shadowboxing in the middle of it. Because he's knocked them all down. And this seems pretty incredible. But then, in the very next scene, we see how Rikishi is training. And he's gone one better. He's in like a stockyard training with bulls.
He's punching bulls in the head and knocking them out.
He incites bulls to charge at him. And then he punches them out. It's so nuts.
We learn later that he'd figured out what Joe's secret move was, and he was training to deal with that move somehow fighting the bulls was going to aid him against Joe. Anyway,
that's pretty much how all of Joe's fights work. Yeah. So you might be shocked to hear that Kumar has only described about 1.5 volumes of this 20-volume manga.
Yeah.
So far. Joe fights people over and over and over, but basically it follows the same pattern whenever he fights someone.
Right.
He will fight sort of like an ethnic caricature.
Right.
Who will have some kind of special... This is very shonen, or it even reminds me a little bit of wuxia, so Chinese martial arts.
Bloodsport?
Or Bloodsport.
Or
Yes.
Street Fighter 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you have a colourful character who has a specialty.
Yeah.
And in order to beat them, you need to come up with the counter to their specialty.
Right.
They're good at crane style,
Right.
you need to learn snake style.
Right.
Or something like that. It's very much like that, but with boxing terminology and boxing moves.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, I've written out a classic Joe Yabuki adventure.
Okay. Excellent. We haven't done one of these in a while. Let's do it.
So essentially, here's where we will begin. Joe is listless. For whatever reason, and gives no fucks.
Yeah. Because he doesn't have a fight on the cards.
Yeah. Something has happened.
He doesn't have
It's and he's like this at the very beginning of his story, too. Then, Joe pisses off, or is pissed off by, a rival boxer.
Mm-hmm.
Next, Joe comes up with a secret technique.
Okay.
Next, the other boxer comes up with a counter for the secret technique,
Right.
which is not shared with us. Danpei then yells, "Joe, don't do it!"
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Then, when boxing, Joe refuses to fall down.
Or he falls and he gets back up.
Yes. He refuses to stay down. Joe refuses to stay down or invents a new secret technique right there in the ring.
There is a Japanese expression which is fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that predates this or this started it. Like, I really felt like reading this was
because
like...
it's Joe's kind of defining characteristic. He's a boxing kind of prodigy.
Yeah.
A savant. He just intuitively understands boxing. He was born to be a boxer.
Yeah.
Boxing is the only thing he can do. Well, I don't know, he's a pretty good grifter. But it's the only place where he's happy.
Yeah.
The only thing he really wants to or is really any good at. But he also never gives up.
Yes.
He can't give up.
Yeah.
And
even when,
Chiba
when he's beaten, it's like, I need the rematch. He wakes up looking for the rematch.
Chiba and Takamori won't let him give up.
Yeah.
He can be knocked down 50 times.
Yeah.
He always gets up 51 times.
In fact, that's what happens in this fight. So the fight happens, and Danpei says, no technical knockouts.
Yep.
He wants that rule out. And they're like, you can't do that. And he says, well, they're different weight classes anyway, so this isn't a legit match in the first place. So let's take out the TKO rule.
So Danpei, that's it. So that means three downs in a round and you're out. That's technical knockout. So Danpei says, let's not do that. Why has he done that? As soon as he heard that Rikishi was knocking out bulls, he said, I have to, Joe has to... The only way Joe's going to win is if he can be knocked down endlessly and he can eventually get back up and deliver the secret technique.
Right. Right. By the way, this weight difference is key to the plot of Ashita no Joe in later volumes.
Yeah.
Between Rikishi and Joe. They're in completely different weight classes. I think they say even Rikishi's like 2 classes up in terms of weight.
Rikishi might even be a lightweight.
Yes.
But I think he's a featherweight, which is 1 weight class above bantamweight, which is what Joe is.
Right.
Although, so eventually, Joe's knocked down 50 billion times.
Yeah.
But he just keeps getting back up because he just does not give up. He's a determinator.
Yeah.
He's an indefatigable man. He just they will not draw him lying down. They only draw him getting back up. And then Rikishi throws a right straight.
Yeah.
And Joe...
Finally, it's going to be his knockout punch. It's like, this is it. I'm finally going to knock this kid out. He throws the punch, and then we get the special move.
Yes.
We finally learn what it is.
It's a cross counter.
Yeah.
Which is Joe's secret... It's his definitive technique.
Yeah.
It's the one he always uses.
And the other thing he always does, I don't know if he does it in this fight, but he has this no-defense stance.
Yes.
He comes forward with his arms down to his side and, like, slightly leaned forward.
Yeah. To invite
attacks. Yeah.
So Joe is what you would call a counter fighter. He waits for you to hit him.
Right.
and then he hits you instead.
While you're in closer, I guess this cross counter is supposed to work by, since your opponent is accelerating towards you.
Oh, no, the manga makes it very
acceleration is part of the impact of your own punch. It like adds together, so you get double.
The manga makes it quite clear.
Yeah.
Because it often breathlessly describes the technique behind a certain style of punch and what effect it will have. So with a cross counter, not only your force is being... The force of your opponent's punch is being added to your punch because they're trying to punch you and moving forwards with that much energy. When you punch them, they are copying both your punch and their punch in theory. This comes into play later when we have double cross counters and triple cross counters.
Yes, but is this made up shonen manga junk?
No, the cross counters are a real thing. Okay. Yeah.
I wasn't sure. It seemed like Naruto running extra fast with his arms behind his back. It's like some weird made up
There's a big element to that. Like boxing really is just thugs pummeling one another, right? But there really is a technique called the cross counter. And everything Danpei teaches Joe is real, essentially. But this is why we're seeing the influence of kind of, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, you can, when you describe sports, you can take things that occur and use it to build a narrative.
Right.
So the wuxia comparison that I made, Chinese martial arts fiction, where everyone is busting out these crazy moves, and then you describe the crazy move that counters the crazy move, and then someone else brings in a crazy move that counters that crazy move that countered your crazy move. You can apply that to boxing too. It's
interesting because all that is in here. This is very much a fight manga thing where everybody's thinking through. You've got reams of captions where people are describing, if I do this, he'll do that. I'll use this move, he'll do that move. Except it works really well in Ashita no Joe, especially in the later volumes, because you've got the commentators ringside. You've got the audience. Yeah. They're telling all that things. He did that move, so he's going to do that move.
In a manga, you can have multiple perspectives, and you don't lose the thread of the story.
No, but the thing is, I think it works well in Joe versus other manga because you don't have Joe in the ring. Most of the time, it's not Joe thinking, if I do this, he'll... We almost never know what Joe's saying.
It's interesting. We never do know. Yeah.
Danpei is saying, you have to do this, or he'll do that, or the audience is saying it, or the commentators are saying it. Yeah. It's not a bunch of thought balloons from Joe.
One of the great strengths of this manga is baffling to me because I should hate Joe.
Yeah.
He's a complete prick.
Yeah.
And yet, over and over when I was reading this, I found myself rooting for him.
Yep.
It's a testament to the quality of the writing.
Yep.
And that Joe is often opaque. We won't be privy to what Joe is thinking. Yep. Instead, we hear what everyone around him is thinking.
Exactly.
His opponent, Danpei, the crowd, the announcers. How is Joe going to do X, Y, Z? And I wanted to know.
Yes.
I just kept turning page after page. I couldn't wait to find out. And I was rooting for him, even though quite often he's fighting against people who are much nicer than him.
Yes. Yes.
And I should have been going for them.
Yes. But I think the presentation of information is so organic, and I think all the manga that have tried to follow it, even if it's supernatural fight manga, your Dragon Ball or something else, or even if it is a sports manga like your, like a volleyball manga, somehow we're stuck in those thought balloons in those ones. Maybe because the audience isn't as big, maybe there's no commentators. I don't know what it is, but somehow it just flows out in Ashita no Joe.
Yeah. The writing is just top notch.
Yeah. So because of this cross counter, they both knock each other out.
Yep. Yes, that's it. And so, which brings me to the final point of a classic Joe adventure. Okay. Joe wins or loses in such a way that he is the real winner.
Like Rocky 1.
Yeah. Yes.
Where he loses by points, but it's like he was the underdog and...
Yep.
Yeah.
So that happens over and over. Here, it's a draw because it's a simultaneous knockout. Yeah. But because Joe was the underdog, not a pro boxer, a whole weight class lower than Rikishi, really this draw is a victory for Joe.
That's right.
Certainly Rikishi thinks so.
Yeah.
Because he now becomes obsessed with the idea of beating Joe.
He wants to beat Joe, and he's released before Joe.
Yep.
He's like, well...
He's released on the day of their, rematch.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's like, out there in the real world, we'll have a pro boxing fight. So that doesn't come until Volume 8. And I want to talk about 8 a little bit. Did you want to go into anything in
No,
between?
Just in the interim, he beats... It occurs pretty much like I described.
Yeah.
He launches his pro boxing career. He's still a jerk. He barely listens to Danpei, even though Danpei builds him a lovely gym under the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Tange gym. There's a whole arc where they try to get kind of like official status for their gym.
Okay.
And none of the boxing federation are not interested in giving official status to Danpei's gym because they all hate Danpei because they think he brings the sport. It reminds them of an earlier time in the sport when everyone was kind of like a lot cruder, and Danpei got thrown out because he would show up drunk and fight with spectators and things like that. But then Joe, because all Joe wants to do is fight. It's the only thing he cares about. He only wants to fight, and he only wants to fight worthy opponents. And at the moment, all he cares about is fighting Rikishi. And he can't fight Rikishi unless he's a pro boxer.
Right.
So he wants to become a pro boxer. So he kind of baits fighters from official gyms.
Right.
So that their managers will have to support.
Okay.
So Joe will often do... So Joe will... Here's another thing, perhaps I should have added in the classic Joe adventure. No one wants to fight Joe. At first, because he's a nobody. Mm-hmm. And second of all, later on, after Volume 8, because he fucking murders people. Spoilers. So usually there will have to be a trick to get a boxer to fight Joe.
Okay.
And that will either occur because of Joe's scheming, because Joe will insult, or he'll do some Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali style baiting, which the press love, and then the boxers feel compelled like they have to fight him. Or, more or less sinisterly, depending on what you think, Yoko sets it up.
Right.
Over and over in later volumes, Yoko is behind kind of like setting up Joe's fights.
Right.
For mysterious reasons.
Right. So he fights this guy named Wolf Kanaguchi.
Yep.
And that kind of, he turns pro effectively at that stage.
Yes. So Wolf has figured out a counter to his cross counter. Right, okay. He's very confident. Like Joe's beat like 3 boxers in a row with his cross counter. Now Wolf is up. He's kind of like the up and comer, and Joe needs to beat him in order to fight Rikishi, or he won't be able to fight Rikishi. Wolf has figured out the double cross counter. Okay. Essentially, he just counters the cross counter, or as they call it in the film, double cross counter.
Yeah.
How does Joe beat that? As I mentioned, he invents a new technique in the ring. Triple cross counter. Yes. He fractures Wolf's jaw, and Wolf is forced to retire. This is a theme over and over. People that face Joe in the ring will be incapacitated and or killed. Yeah.
Yep. So Rikishi is now working for the Shiraki gym.
Yep.
At this stage now, finally the rematch happens between Rikishi and Joe. But in order to do this in Volume 8, he has to get down to Joe's weight class.
Yeah.
So
he's 2 weight classes up on Joe, essentially.
So he's starving himself. He is locking himself in a storage closet at night, so that he doesn't drink any water. In fact, he escapes one night, and all the taps have been tied up
by Yoko. Yeah.
And
he looks. This is horrible.
Yes.
He looks like he looks like something out of a horror manga.
Yep.
Like something out of Kazuo Umezu.
Yes. The eyes are just like
staring
skeletal.
In his head.
Yeah. Totally.
And people are freaking out when they see him.
Yeah.
It's like, this is too much.
Yeah. So
this is a real thing. Cutting for weight to get into a weight division, people get seriously hurt doing this.
Yes. And they get in the ring, they have this huge match. It's like 150 pages, I think, about the length of the fight. Joe manages to land a punch on the side of his head, and then he falls into the ropes in a weird way that he might be concussed. He's already punch drunk at this stage and is not okay due to the starvation and dehydration, etc.
Rikishi,
Rikishi's already messed up, and now he's hit his head, and he's probably concussed.
And there's also some of this technique versus technique stuff going on, the wuxia thing. Rikishi will only uppercut.
Yeah.
He won't do jabs or straights or hooks, because those punches can be countered by Joe's cross counter.
Yes. By the way, Joe trained for this by fighting Danpei and Nishi at the same time. They both came at him and were doing like uppercuts non-stop at him to train for this. Which is another, I think it's a comic booky thing. I don't think you'd ever train against 2 guys at the same time.
This is the fun of the comic.
Oh, absolutely.
This is what keeps you turning the pages.
Of course. Of course.
You need to train in a crazy Mr. Miyagi way in order to in order to counter your opponent's secret.
Yes.
Everything's secret. No one wins on everything's secret techniques.
Yeah.
Even the final match.
Yeah.
With the Mexican boxer Carlos
Mendoza.
Mendoza, what a name.
Yeah.
Even Mendoza himself has a kind of like a crazy technique that Joe needs to figure out. No one is just a boxer.
Right.
But that's the thrill.
Yes.
No one wants to really read about blokes, equally talented blokes hitting one another. It all has to be shenanigans, wacky shenanigans, and how you figure out how to beat it.
Yeah. So Rikishi actually knocks out Joe. He wins by knocking out Joe. So he wins the match. Joe goes to shake his hand. Joe gets up, finally gets up after Rikishi has been declared the winner. Goes to shake his hand. But then Rikishi passes out in the ring. Joe goes to his locker room. The press come into his room, and Dampei's like, you're supposed to leave the loser alone. Go interview the winner. And they're like, he's dead.
Yeah. He straight up died.
He died. Because he had starved himself, he was concussed, etc. Everything. He killed himself for this match, basically. Joe is messed up by this.
He sort of died of a brain hemorrhage when he hit the ropes, as you mentioned.
Yes.
So Joe punched him in the temple.
Yeah.
And then he fell on the ropes. That combined with his weakened condition from that extreme weight loss regimen that he followed, that meant that he died.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say Joe is messed up by this and can't do...
Not only Joe, real world Japan is messed up by this and have to hold a funeral for Rikishi.
That's exactly... You saw this too.
Much like when Laura Palmer died, they were like, we gotta have a funeral for this lady.
At least 700 people showed up to a...
Yes, in suits, like for a funeral.
I saw footage of this.
Yeah.
They put a picture of Rikishi up on the wall.
Yeah.
And, they're burning incense. It was full on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll see. I just want to talk about the final volume as well. Is there anything you want to talk about between 9 and 19?
In the interim, it just follows basically what I said.
Yeah.
Joe will have lost his mojo for whatever reason. Whatever reason. Because he bashed someone. Because he killed Rikishi. Because of, because he lost the fight.
Yeah.
Because Carlos... Eventually, he ends up fighting a Venezuelan boxer called Carlos Riviera.
Yes.
And so Yoko, after Joe beats Rikishi, he can't do head punches anymore. He keeps boxing, but people quickly notice that he only does body blows. And so, like the sinister forces in the Boxing Federation, they decide they got to get rid of Joe.
Okay.
And because they don't like Dampei, and they don't like Joe because he kills fighters. He's like unstoppable monster. And he's going to ruin all their records. So they cook up a plan to get rid of him. And 3 boxers sort of kind of fight him, 2 soften him up, and then the 3rd one figures out that he can only do body blows. And so, it just guards the body and is sort of like beating the shit out of him. And he starts losing. He loses to these 3 boxers. And then Joe becomes listless again, as he does, because he's kept losing fights. And Dampei's like, Joe! No, Joe! Meanwhile, Nishi's become kind of like a decent heavyweight boxer.
Yeah.
But he ends up fracturing his hand and retiring from boxing. I mentioned that there are no good characters. Nishi is probably the exception.
Yes.
And he's also the only one that has any character development.
Yes, he gets married, right?
Because he gets married.
Yeah.
He starts off as a thug in juvie.
Yeah.
He then struggles to keep up with Joe, keeps eating udon when he's meant to be cutting. Then after Joe is incapacitated for a while, is off on one of his whiny, flighty periods, Joe comes back and suddenly he's like in perfect shape. He's been inspired to stop eating the udon and stay in shape. Then he fractures his hand, retires from boxing, works for a local shop, which Joe also works at, except Joe's terrible. We see like these slice-of-life scenes where Joe is like hopeless in this. He's always messing up orders. All he wants to do is go and watch boxing on the TV. And Nishi's kind of like covering for him and stuff like that. And then Nishi ends up marrying Noriko, the daughter of the shop owner whom they work for, who was in love with Joe, but she settles for Nishi.
Okay.
Anyway, so Yoko becomes fixated on Joe after Rikishi died. Originally, she and Rikishi were close, but after Rikishi dies, Yoko becomes fixated on Joe. and it's not really clear why.
Right. Doesn't she declare her love to him at some stage?
Well, eventually that's the explanation we get, which I think is a bit weak, honestly.
Yeah.
But she gets revenge on these 3 boxers that humiliated Joe into these 3 losses by inviting Carlos Riviera out and having him... So he's a kind of like ranked 6th in the world in terms of bantamweight, and no one wants to fight him because he's so dangerous. Yet he plays the fool. He's very, he's got like a rose between his teeth, and he's always hitting on girls and stuff. And she invites these 3 boxers that humiliated Joe to fight him, and they do fight him because they think his reputation's undeserved, and then he throws a couple of fights, and it seems like he's winning them by flukes, but actually he's incredibly talented and dangerous, and he ends up putting all 3 of them in the hospital.
Okay.
And then, because of that, what's point 2? Joe pisses off or is pissed off by a boxer. Joe is pissed off by Carlos because he wants to fight him, so he gets revved up.
Right. That's
all he wants to do, fight worthy opponents. So he gets revved up, he wants to fight Carlos. They have a fight. Joe ends up beating him, but they've become friends like he did with Rikishi. Then Carlos goes off and fights Mendoza.
Yeah.
And is essentially brain damaged
Yeah.
by Mendoza. So then, after that, Joe sets his sights on
the final
Mendoza.
fight, yes, which is the big Mendoza fight. This is...
Before he can fight Mendoza, he has to fight a Korean guy. We won't get into that. Right. Korean guy's like a robot.
Okay.
So Joe kind of has to fight his opposites. Like I said, you've got this gimmicky guy. He has to fight 2 guys before he can fight Mendoza. He has to fight this Korean robot, and then he has to fight jungle martial arts guy from Bloodsport.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A guy called Harimau from who's literally he's a guy raised by wolves.
Okay.
So he doesn't have a single line of dialogue. He just goes grr grr grr, and the idea is that
seems hard to coach somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's page after page of his coaches giving him chocolate to try and calm him down. It's so nuts. But I see what the author was saying. First, Joe has to fight. Joe is kind of like the perfect boxer because he's both analytical and wild. So first he has to beat the analytical guy, the South Korean guy.
Right.
Then he has to beat the wild guy,
right.
the Malaysian tribesman. It's very offensive, this Malaysian tribesman.
Right.
Then he fights Mendoza, volume 20.
Right, so there's a big final fight. It's like almost 300 pages, and the whole thing is the fight. I'd say, boy, what a difference between 3 panels of Sam Fisher versus 300 pages.
Yeah.
Drawn by Tetsuya Chiba. It absolutely... Every page is detonating. Like, it's just... Everything's epic. I could not believe what I was reading. I was, flipping pages so fast. Just flipping like crazy. Trying to get through it. It was amazing. Really, absolutely amazing. One could throw the backs and forth. The main thing about it is that Joe, during this fight, has a flashback moment where he's talking to Dampé between rounds in the corner. And he says, I envision my passion as like burning red.
Yep.
And once it's burned through, all that will be left is white ash.
Yeah. And he says, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
That's the only time he'll stop. He'll only stop when there's only ash left.
There's only white ash
left.
left.
Because Dampé's like saying, you're going to get killed.
Yeah, after 3 rounds, he's like, you went 3 rounds against the best boxer. Just stay down. Don't worry about it. You've proven yourself. You don't need to keep getting up. Stay down. He won't stay down.
If you're a boxer, you got to be thinking about the next match, right? But Joe never thinks... Joe only cares about beating...
Yeah.
Joe never really cares about tomorrow, despite being called...
No, that's right.
Tomorrow's
that's
Joe.
Right. That's right.
He's not thinking about his next match. He's only thinking about... Unless the next match is to fight the guy he really wants to fight.
Yes.
Now he's fighting the guy he really wants to fight. That's the only thing he cares about. He goes 15 rounds with Mendoza.
Yeah.
Mendoza is arguably a better boxer than Joe.
Yes, and he wins by points.
Yes.
At the end.
But, like Mendoza, it's reading, it's like you said, reading these pages, Mendoza is beating the shit out of Joe. And you feel it. You keep wanting him to hit Mendoza.
Yeah.
And yet over and over.
Yeah.
Mendoza is just laying into, and you feel it reading it. Yeah. It's coming off the page.
Yeah.
And you're just thinking, how much can he take? But the writers, the writer and the artist, they won't let Joe go down.
Yeah.
He just keeps getting back up. He must get up, he must get knocked down 12, 14, 15 times. Impossible, really, for a person to go through this much punishment.
Yeah.
But he just keeps getting up. And Mendoza, this perfect boxer, who incidentally is a much better person than Joe, because he's a family man, loves his wife, loves his children, whereas Joe doesn't care about anybody. In fact, Yoko has confessed her love to Joe right before this fight started. So I guess all those things, all that manipulation, all that stuff she's been doing has been out of love, transferred love from Rikishi maybe. I don't know, but Joe's just like, thanks, but I'm still going to go fight.
Yeah.
Joe has hated her all this time, incidentally, and then she's just sort of confessed her love to him. Amusingly, Danpei is trying to throw in the towel to literally save Joe's life.
Yeah.
And Joe throws the towel away. Joe treats Danpei with no respect.
Yeah.
He has no respect for Danpei. 20 volumes, no respect.
Yeah.
He's just a complete prick.
Yeah.
He throws the towel out of the ring. Yoko comes up to the ring. She picks up the towel. Danpei says, "Oh, thanks. Could you give that to me?"
She throws
it on the ground.
Yeah.
And then she urges Joe, "You got to keep fighting."
Yeah.
And I've written down, Yoko loves him, yet she urges him on to his death. Because that, of course, is where we're going.
Yeah.
I guess what Joe wants is more important than what she wants.
I guess.
Yes. I mean, there is some sexism. I mean, we get quite a few lines where she needs to butt out of the man's world of boxing.
Yes, but I think in this moment that's not it. It's just it's what Joe wants versus what anyone else wants.
Yep.
If anybody else had said, "I don't want you to fight," even Danpei, telling him stop fighting, he won't.
Because he's so indomitable. His determination is his defining characteristic. So Mendoza is eventually getting rattled because he keeps hitting him and he keeps getting back up.
Yeah.
Also, Mendoza, like all these foreign boxers, has a gimmick. He has a glass jaw, but he doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't want anybody to know that. So he sort of does a trick where he gets an opponent in a clinch and invites them to hit him to make him seem like he's invincible. But actually, when you're in a clinch, you can't punch with as much force as you would normally because you've got hands on your shoulders. It makes him seem invincible, but actually he's covering up for the fact that he's secretly weak. He can't take a punch.
Yeah.
So Joe's punching him, but for every punch Joe delivers, Mendoza is giving him 10.
Yeah. There's a whole point where Joe loses vision in one eye.
Yeah, oh god.
But because his vision is blurred, he's actually landing hits because his aim is off.
Oh yeah. Because Mendoza's such a great dodger.
There's a whole round. That's a whole round as well.
There'll often be a thing like that. I didn't mention that, but Joe will often win because of some gimmick.
Yeah. So let me just read. I'm going to read the Wikipedia page because it has a good summary of the end of this. The match eventually goes all 15 rounds. Joe hands Yoko his gloves and tells Danpei that everything has burnt to ashes, which is what he was talking about before. Mendoza's declared the winner by points, but his hair has turned white from the trauma of the fight. Danpei turns to console Joe, only to find him sitting unresponsive in his chair with a smile on his face. It's a very iconic last image of any manga. Everybody in Japan knows what this image is of him sitting.
But I know it. As I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but I once owned the entire 20 volumes of Ashita no Joe in Japanese.
Yeah.
Which I could not read.
Yeah.
But I knew enough, even then, to flick to the last page.
Right. Right.
And see the final image, which is, unlike any other panel in the entire manga, is done in reverse kind of...
Like a negative.
Like a negative. So it's all white. Yeah. So Joe is... White is the predominant, like all the colour... Joe is white instead of black.
Yes, the white ash, yeah.
Yeah. And he's sitting there with a smile on his face. He's upright, but it's pretty clear that he has died.
Yeah, well, let me read the next paragraph here.
Please.
It has long been debated whether Joe died in the ending. Artist Chiba stated that he drew the ending at the last minute and that Takamori's original ending was different. Takamori stated in a 1979 biography that Joe died, while Chiba has refused to directly comment, hinting that Joe may have survived. In a 2001 interview, forensic pathologist Masahiko Ueno concluded that Joe had to be alive in the final panel to remain upright. But it's a comic book. These people are fighting bulls.
Yeah, people are fighting bulls, and pigs.
I don't know if that counts.
And there's a guy that's doing backflips in the ring from Malaysia.
Yeah.
He literally runs around on the ropes. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's bullshit. All that matters really is what I think.
Yes.
No, okay, but to be serious, I mean, you've got, everything has indicated that he's given everything. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
he said he's burned down to ash.
Yeah.
And Joe, we also know that Joe is punch drunk by this point.
Right.
So, in modern parlance, he's suffered chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So he's sustained serious damage to his brain, which is going to eventually incapacitate and kill him from having been punched so many times. It's been from about volume 16 onwards, it's been clear that Joe has suffered brain damage from his time in the ring.
Okay, right.
He keeps crashing cars, he can't walk in a straight line.
Okay.
By volume 19, he can't do up his shirt buttons.
Right.
And there's a kind of a theme where both Danpei and Yoko are trying to get him to stop boxing because he's suffered traumatic brain damage.
Right.
And of course,
he won't.
if you've been listening, you know that Joe won't stop.
Yeah.
Nothing will make him stop. So it's been made plain by volume 20 that Joe doesn't have a future in boxing beyond this point. And it's been made plain since volume 2 or so that a Joe that can't box he can't exist without it.
Yeah.
It's literally the only thing he can or wants to do.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect thematic sense for him to have passed away at this point.
Yeah.
Everything indicates that he did.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
The negative, the switch from black to white, all of this other stuff that I just mentioned here. Oh yeah, I have no doubt.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about this movie.
Oh my god!
Now there was a movie in 1970 which is 85 minutes long.
That would have been great to watch that.
Yeah, we don't have a version with English subtitles, but I will say it's 1970, so it's before the series has ended because it didn't end until 73.
Oh, you're right.
But maybe Rikishi has died by this because he died in 70. Maybe he's dead at this point in the series. I'm not sure.
I downloaded it and I even watched bits of it.
Yeah. But we don't know.
But we might not, unless someone translates it.
Yeah.
One of us has that capability.
Well, it's interesting. So there is a version of this on DVD with English subtitles that's available from Malaysia. I don't know where the subtitles on YouTube came from. There's this
machine,
it's on
surely,
YouTube.
right?
I don't know. They're pretty decent subtitles. But the thing I wanted to say about this is about me translating the 1970 version is this is a lot of yelling, street lingo. I was like, this is just gobbledygook. Like, I could not understand a single sentence. I was like, how did this person translate this? Did they just pull lines from the manga and stick them in there, or what? How did they do this?
Right.
Because maybe there are Japanese subs on the Japanese DVD.
Right.
This channel is just all Ashita no Joe content. I'm surprised this hasn't been taken down, and I don't know where the subs came from, but they're decent subs. Anyway,
this is the one we're watching.
The one we watched on YouTube. Yeah. The one we watched on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, so this version, we start with the Japan. It's set in the 60s. Smartly, they didn't try to update it. We see what Japan looked like at the time. We go into the slums. We get Yoko in the very first scene. She's driving up to some place in a car in the slum.
Yes.
And we don't know quite what this is about yet, but we'll talk about why she has to be introduced in this scene, because they've shifted some stuff around.
They certainly have.
Okay, start with Joe. It's after the Yoko scene. He's asleep in a field. Some kids come up and bother him. The kids are super cute. Yeah. He throws a CGI paper airplane, which just seems to fly forever, up into Ashita tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. This film lays some of this imagery on thick. So
yes.
We have a couple of visual representations of what I imagine is Joe.
Yeah.
One is this paper airplane made out of like crappy newspaper, yet it flies.
Yeah.
Joe. Another is a weed.
Yes, a dandelion.
A dandelion growing on the Bridge of Tears.
Yeah.
Under which the gym is built.
Yes, but the Bridge of Tears also is supposed to represent, well, it doesn't, not supposed, I should say supposed to represent, because it's stated explicitly by Danpei, that when you cross the bridge, you're crossing into the slums. That means your life has taken a wrong turn.
Yep.
And he wants Joe to walk back across the bridge the other way.
Yep.
And
that was in the manga, very much so. Yeah.
Right, and the dandelion is growing on this bridge. So.
Yes. So, I mean, a difference here between the manga and the film from this stage is that we're leaning into the idea that there's an arc.
Yes.
Or there's something redemptive, there's a story going on with Joe's character.
Yes.
Which I think really is kind of missing from the manga.
Okay.
Joe's mostly just a machine that exists to do knockouts.
Right.
But here in the film, I mean, this is much shorter, and it's a different medium. So here we've got the idea of Joe as kind of like a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
A bit more.
So I just want to mention before we get too far into it. So the director is Fumihiko Sori. Yep. He's directed about 10 movies. About 8 of them are based on manga or video games or something. So he'll definitely be back at least for 1, possibly for 4 more episodes.
Brilliant.
The writer, Eriko Shinozaki...
This is a woman.
Yeah, she has also written... I think she's written a few other things that might show up on the podcast. If they have...
I
if
hope
we can
so.
find English releases.
I didn't like this screenplay very much, but I hope... Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So... Okay, next Joe goes to this... He's in an eatery. He's in a little diner.
Yep.
And the kids are huddled around him, watching him eat and kind of trying to steal food and stuff.
He's got a whole table full of food that he clearly can't pay for.
Yeah.
I don't know why the owners of this slum kind of like eatery have given him all this food when he clearly has no capability of paying for it, but whatever. Then we see Danpei. He's here as well. He's drinking. This is also a bar as well as a...
Yes, and he's...
noodle shop.
This kid, the actor is, he's not as stocky as Danpei in the manga, but they've given him these fake buck teeth that are absolutely crazy. And he's got the crazy mustache, which is just like the 2 bits on either side and nothing in the middle.
Not many Japanese people have the phenotype of Danpei Tange.
Right.
I mean, he's basically a square.
Yeah. Yes.
But this guy is pretty good. The actor is called Teruyuki Kagawa. And... they've given him prosthetic teeth.
Yeah.
The actor, of course, does not have these teeth. The real guy doesn't have these.
They're crazy, but like cartoon buck teeth.
Yeah.
By the way, almost all these actors are going to come back on the podcast.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than once.
Oh yeah. He's got the whiskers, and they've shaved his head, and they've even given him prosthetic scars.
Yeah.
Like Danpei in the manga had, although they have omitted the stitches.
Yeah. So
he can box. I mean, this guy took some boxing lessons too.
Right. Okay.
Clearly, I mean, like he beats the shit out of a few guys.
Yeah. So he's drunk in there, and then a gang enforcer shows up. This Yakuza enforcer shows up to collect a debt from Danpei in the bar. Danpei sees this guy, this huge enforcer, and is like, hey, you can make a great boxer. The guy doesn't care. He starts beating him up, throws him out on the street.
This is a familiar refrain. Everybody knows that Danpei's looking for the next big thing. That actually happened in the manga too. Yeah.
Yes, well, when he starts chasing Joe, they're like, in the manga, they're like, oh, he's here he goes, there goes Danpei again, trying to get another boxer.
Yeah.
So, Danpei's beat up by this guy, and then the head gangster, the I don't know if they're called the Onihime Gaming in the movie, but he's out there in the street watching this happen.
I'm pretty sure this gangster character, the head gangster, who inexplicably is an important character in the film.
Sort of, yeah. He's got 3 scenes.
For no reason.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's based off a character in the manga called Gendo, Gangster Gendo.
Okay.
He appears in essentially 2 stories in the manga. It's not important. In the first one, he beats the shit out of Wolf Kanagami, or whatever the guy's name is.
Kanaguchi, yeah.
Kanaguchi. Wolf Kanaguchi, after he gets his jaw broken by Joe, ends up working as like a mob enforcer.
Well, in the manga and in this Onihime gang leader tries to recruit Joe.
Yeah.
So he's in there for that. That's like similar to the manga in that respect.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as it is. He has a second appearance in the manga where he helps Joe train to fight the Malaysian guy.
Okay.
Because the Malaysian, like Monkey Man, they call him Monkey Man over and over.
Okay.
It's really great.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he doesn't fight like a traditional boxer, because how do you train a guy that doesn't speak Japanese, English, or any language whatsoever?
Right.
He doesn't fight like a normal boxer, so Joe decides he needs to train with mob enforcers who are accustomed to just beating up people.
Right.
So he contacts this gangster Gendo guy and has him bring all his enforcers, and they all attack Joe at once in the ring. Anyway.
Okay, so Joe fights the gang out in the street. I can't remember. Did he come to Danpei's defense? Was this...
The gangsters throw Danpei across his dinner.
Right.
But he does... Essentially, he is coming to Danpei's defense.
Yes, and we get
Here's
this...
a difference between the Joe of the manga and the Joe of the film. The Joe of the film is basically a decent person.
Joe in the manga came to Sachi's defense, a little 5-year-old girl.
It's his sole redeeming feature, aside from his determination, is that he likes kids.
Here he seems to come to Danpei's defense.
Yes.
We get this comedy blues music going on in the background.
The whole film has blues music.
Yeah.
It's an odd choice. Is it odd? I guess they're going for some sort of association with the Rust Belt in the US, which is an odd choice for a pivotal Japanese manga.
I agree.
Because the opening scenes has Joe walking through, as you mentioned, the slum. We see coal factories and kind of like iron foundries and things like that. And they're playing this harmonica, this blues music. Yeah. And I'm thinking, why are you doing that? Yeah. This is a famous Japanese story.
Yeah, it's a weird choice. The music is not... I mean, we don't... And even during the boxing scenes, which don't have that type of music, just have some other theme. I mean...
I've got a point. I want to return to this.
Yeah.
Because... Well, I could talk about it right now. This manga just has lost its edge since the 70s. So it used to really talk to people at that time, because it was a time when Japan was coming out of a long post-war reconstruction period and was becoming wealthy again, and what was kind of like the direction of Japan, and start thinking about tomorrow instead of just today. I reached out. I mentioned that I owned the mangas, right? I reached out to the guy who gave me those mangas, who is a boxer, actually.
Okay.
And he told me that... what did he say? He said that this manga is the Bible of boxing mangas. Right? He said, quote, "Joe is a bad boy and destructive. The only place he fits in is in boxing. My parents' generation thinks a real boxer has to be someone like him. A bad person. A legendary person. He said he's a legend and great, but his situation is too poor for Japanese people of my generation to understand."
Ah, okay.
So we have to throw in this Rust Belt stuff, because otherwise contemporary Japanese people won't get it.
Right. Oh, okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so now Danpei's like, "Gee, you're a good fighter. Why don't you become a boxer? I'll train you." And he's like, "I don't care about boxing.
No.
I don't care about tomorrow. Today's good enough for me."
Yes. He literally says that, doesn't he? Yeah.
Now he's arrested, and this is 10 minutes into the movie. Now, we don't go through the first arrest, and then the jail, and then the juvenile. No. Straight to juvenile 10 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, well, you got to.
Yes, exactly, you got to. He meets Nishi here at the reformatory, not in the jail, and Nishi's like a mousy guy who is like cleaning the toilets for the rest of the gang.
Nishi, I think, is the same actor from the first scene. Is it the same actor that tried to hustle Danpei from the first scene?
Oh, is it?
I think so.
That would be weird.
It is weird.
That can't be right. It's just a guy that looks similar, has a similar husky build.
Possible. But
you're telling me that guy, the enforcer that beat the crap out of Danpei?
Well, it would be consistent with the manga, because he was like a tough guy.
Yeah,
but then
that's true.
I went back and looked at the guy's face, and they seem to be the same guy. They've got the same sideboards.
Yeah.
They have that same husky build.
Okay. We'll have to dig into it, and then...
It's not important, but I think...
Okay.
I think it's the same character. But it's just another shortcut. We haven't... This film takes a lot of shortcuts. Yeah. It has to. I mean, it's adapting... I mean, really, it only adapts volumes 1 to 8.
Yes.
But even then, we're still talking about 1,200 pages.
Well, okay, I'm gonna talk a lot about shortcuts here in about 5 seconds.
Great.
So Joe fights all these guys, the tough guys, in his cell because they're sleeping 22 a room, and he's thrown into solitary. Yep. When he's in solitary, he gets a postcard.
Yep.
Postcard number 1, "For the sake of tomorrow, the jab."
Yep.
Hang on. In the comic, they had been training together under the bridge. Yep. They had a relationship. Danpei and Joe had a relationship. They had done some boxing training. This postcard makes sense in the manga.
Yep.
Here, continue your training while you're in solitary.
Yep.
Here, Danpei had said to the enforcer, "You'd make a good boxer." Then he said to Joe, "You'd make a good boxer." Now suddenly he's sending Joe these postcards. He has no relationship with him.
It's on fast forward.
He has a one-sentence relationship with the guy.
Yep, that's right.
In fact, when he's thrown in jail, he comes out of there, he's all sad. I'm like, why?
Joe,
why? He's in jail. It's like, no, aren't you sad for the enforcer as well? Like, you had as much relationship and thought that guy was as good of a boxer as Joe was.
Well, Joe beat the shit out of the enforcer, so
That's
I guess
true.
he's lashed on it.
Maybe.
No, you're right. Everything's on fast forward. So Joe receives the postcard.
At 12 minutes. This is the 12-minute mark.
I'm okay with it, because we need to keep this moving. But you're right. Yeah. Sometimes the fast forward, it works in service of the story. Sometimes it really doesn't. Joe rips it up. Instead of just ripping up a postcard, they do it in CGI.
Yes.
This film uses way too much CGI.
Yes.
Why? It's really easy to rip up a postcard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Why
would you?
did they do that? Maybe to make sure the pieces matched? I don't know.
But just rip it up in 4 pieces and then stick them back together.
I don't know.
I don't understand it. It's ripped up in like 50 pieces, and as I watched them flutter to the ground in CGI, I thought, you can't put that back together.
Yeah. By the way, so Dampé has also gotten his job at this stage. So he can build a gym, he says to his co-workers, for Joe.
Yeah.
Again, what is the relationship between Dampé and Joe that he's like gotten a job to get this guy in jail, to build a gym for this guy in jail?
Adam,
Okay, I couldn't get it. Anyway,
it's funny, that didn't bother me as much, but since you pointed out,
well,
it really makes sense.
Again, this is a thing that happens in this podcast every week. You've read the comics, so you know what the template is supposed to be.
Oh boy, I want to return to that.
You know what's supposed to happen, so you come into the movie and you're like, oh, he's there because of that thing, but actually the movie hasn't told us.
I want to return to that because I felt that really strongly this week.
Okay, so he gets in the cafeteria, he gets in a brawl with all the guys. This Joe, I feel, is angrier than the Joe in the comic. Like, he's not gleeful about the fights as much. He's, like, angry at these guys. And he's fighting.
He's very sullen, this one. Whereas Joe in the comics often has a smile on his face.
That's right.
He's either angry or happy.
He's got the plucky spirit in the comic, and I'm not sure he has the plucky spirit here. No. He's got an abused as a child, angry kind of spirit in this, I would say. But eventually the crowd kind of separates out into a circle, and he's fighting this one guy who is Rikishi, turns out. Yep. And he gets into a big fight with this guy.
Rikishi, played by Yûsuke Iseya.
Yeah.
Wonderfully cast.
Yeah. Maybe one of the best casting moves. A really interesting face. I think Joe is good too.
He's fine, but
he's like kind of like a heartthrob. And
he's like an idol, so a singer in a
he is literally an idol singer. Yeah. And when he came, I mean, he does really well later in the movie. But initially, when he came on screen, I was like, okay, this guy's just a heartthrob, and that's why he's been. But no, he's actually decent.
He does his best. Look, he did his best, but he's plainly cast because of his draw.
Yeah.
Like he's like a member of a boy band.
Yeah.
He did his best to get in shape. He trained for a month.
Yeah.
Before filming began, which by Hollywood standards, I guess, sounds cheap. But actually, let's face it, to do a month of physical training on a special diet and taking boxing lessons every single day, by the end of that month, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
He is in good shape.
And he is. Not as good shape as Iseya, but still.
We'll talk about that when we get to it. We have to talk about that. So he uses the jab, which he learned in the post-yard on Rikishi. So he's getting beat up by Rikishi, and he uses that, and he's like, holy shit, that worked.
Yeah, and Rikishi couldn't believe it, too.
Yeah, Rikishi also, So he's thrown into solitary again. Yep. He trains by beating up a mattress, which he does in the manga.
Yep, he gets his next postcard, the straight.
Yep.
So he's punching the mattress over and over and over.
Yep. We see him out hoeing the garden, so he's doing his Miyagi training, even though he doesn't have to be at this stage, because no match has been set up.
Yep.
He's just doing it for no reason, really.
He wants to beat Rikishi now.
Yes. So now, Yoko shows up at the prison. Yep. She hasn't shown up to perform The Hunchback of Notre Dame. No. She's there because she wants to set up a boxing match, because her grandfather runs a gym.
Yep.
And we learned that Rikishi was a fighter from her gym.
Fine. This is fine. This is basically what happens in the manga, but in fast forward.
Yes.
So here she is running the gym at this point. Already. Whereas in the manga, the gym is built later, and they end up recruiting Rikishi to it.
Right.
After they've met in prison. Right. Here, he's already, as you pointed out, he's already in their stable.
They've already established these relationships.
Fine, this is okay.
Yes. And this is also why we've had her in that opening shot, because we don't have the trial scene where she shows up at the trial. There was no trial. He went straight to the reformatory, basically, at minute 5 or whatever. So Dampé shows up to train Joe. So, because somehow she's agreed for the Rikishi wants to fight Joe. She's like, why do you want to fight that guy? And he's like, I want to do it or maybe that's for the pro. Anyway, she agrees to have him.
These guys always want to fight one another, and we just have to accept it.
Yes. So
they're just very passionate.
So at 25 minutes into the movie, we get this match.
Yep.
We have similar rules. There's no technical knockouts.
Oh, all the kids love Joe as well.
The kids love Joe.
They shouldn't love him at this point. In the manga, we had many pages of them making friends.
Yes.
At first they attacked him, and then he sort of won them over. Here they just love him for no reason.
They just automatically love him.
Because he's the designated...
You know what? This is one where I didn't notice it because the kids are so cute.
They are cute. That little girl especially.
Yeah. The editing here was interesting because Yoko is kind of looking at Rikishi in a way that looks like she has romantic interest in him. The way they've edited these shots together of her looking at him in the ring.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff in this match, I have to say. There's a moment where he's been knocked down a couple times, and he's been knocked down maybe for the second time, I can't remember. And the shot is of Rikishi's back as he returns to his corner.
Yep.
And we're looking at his back, and we hear the ref counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And then he stops at 3. And it just goes silent. We're like, what's going on? And we're looking at Rikishi's back, so we don't see Joe getting up, but we know from the audio of the ref that he's gotten up.
He's got back up.
It's a really great moment.
It is pretty good.
Yeah.
There's some... It's a bit oversalted with CGI and some things like that.
There is a CGI bit here that I like, and I'll tell you what it is. In the comic, when Joe does the cross counter, Rikishi and Joe actually freeze.
Yeah.
They stop as they're about to both fall over, knocked out. And the crowd is like, what's going on? They're both frozen. It's a comic book moment, right?
You can't freeze people in real life.
No,
like
but they do CGI freeze them. That's how they've substituted in this CGI freeze as if it's a metaphorical moment instead of a literal moment. And they've used the special effects for that purpose.
I see.
I was like, okay with that.
I'm pleased you like that. I found it objectionable.
Okay.
But for the exact same reasons that you just said, because it's something you can do in a comic but not in a film.
Right.
Well, whatever. Without special effects, yeah.
Right. Okay, so he wants a rematch, of course. They both want a rematch. Joe is released. Rikishi has already been released, and we have a little flashback shot where he says, I'll be waiting.
An odd order of this scene. Why not just show the scene where he says, I'll be waiting for you first?
I don't know why they
do it as a
flashback. It's almost like they forgot, and then they edited it in afterwards. They're like, oh shit, we forgot to put the I'll be waiting moment in there.
It's weird.
The gym is there. The
looks exactly like it does in the comic, which I liked.
Yep. Now we get a training montage, one of many montages in this 2 hours and 15-minute movie.
Oh, God, was it only 2 hours and 15 minutes?
Yeah. And this is when the gangster shows up and, tries to recruit him.
Why?
Not sure.
What purpose does this scene serve?
He says if your boxing fails, you can come work for me.
This scene serves no purpose. I don't understand why it's here.
It should be here if there was a major vein in the movie, which was Joe has two paths. Either becomes a pro boxer or he ends up in a life of crime.
But that never happens.
Rocky 1, it's like you either win this or you are going to be illiterate for the rest of your life.
You know what? I reckon it's probably... I think you've hit on something there. I think it's probably the influence of Rocky. Because Joe was never interested in being... Because Joe doesn't take orders
Rocky
from
is
people.
an enforcer in that first movie. He's an illiterate enforcer.
Well,
and it seems like he's going to be stuck in this life. Unless he wins this fluke.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the differences between Joe and Rocky later. But I feel like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's... People talk about the influence of Ashita no Joe on Rocky, which I don't necessarily think is a fruitful line of discourse. But it may be appropriate to talk about the influence of Rocky on this film.
Yeah.
Because this scene makes no sense. Because Joe never shows a sign of ever wanting to become a Yakuza guy. He can't abide taking orders from people.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Nothing in the comic ever, aside from that scene in the very first volume where he gets in a fight with that gang and they ask him to join them, never, ever, ever, ever again is it ever hinted at that Joe would ever have anything to do with organised crime.
Yeah.
He'll often commit petty crimes.
Yeah.
But organised crime, never. And yet here, the film devotes... I mean, it's a long film, but plenty of characters get no development in this film. And yet we devote 3 minutes to a scene with... I assume it's Gangster Gendo. I mean, he's dressed the same. Why put it in? I think it might well be that the influence of Rocky.
During the final fight, the gangster actually sheds a tear.
Yeah.
we get a cutaway
is he
shot to him
there?
shedding a tear. Yeah.
Oh, I regret my life of crime. Joe has showed me another way.
Yeah.
I love you, Adrian.
By the way, meanwhile, Rikishi is training. I mean, Joe's training in this dump.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this is the moment where we get the montage of Rikishi training as well, but it's very much Ivan Drago,
And Rocky Balboa.
Rocky, where he's in this nice, the Shiraki gym.
Yep.
Whereas Joe's in this dump and he's doing these. Nishi is like holding him and he's doing push-ups, and every time he comes down, Dampé punches him in the stomach.
Yes.
It reminded me a bit of Rocky doing the sit-ups on the ledge in that cabin in Russia.
Yes. And chopping wood.
Yeah.
Or punching sides of beef.
Yes.
Whereas Ivan Drago's having the steroids.
He has a computer that measures the pounds per inch or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you're right. I think we're seeing the shadow that Rocky's cast over this film rather than vice versa.
So, Joe starts working his way up in the boxing world.
Yep.
He has his no defense stance we see here. It's funny seeing it live action. In a comic, it really works fine. It's shonen comic. Fine. Guy's got his arms down his side, his head's leaning forward, waiting for the punch. Seeing in a live action movie,
you're gonna get punched in the face.
Bit strange to put that on screen, but anyway, it's there. Fine. He's using his cross counter. Now, Yoko wants him to fight Wolf Kaneguchi.
Yes.
Now, at this point, we learn that, we have a flashback to her, and she has this backstory where she grew up...
A meaningless backstory.
She grew up in this... She actually, despite thinking there was a rich girl who wears these beautiful white clothes, she, for some reason, went to kindergarten in this slum.
This makes no sense.
I don't know why they sent her... I didn't pick up why they sent her to go to school in the slum, why her parents sent her there.
This is bonkers. Bonkers. None of it makes sense, and it adds nothing. So she wants to... Here we've added kind of like a meaningless subplot where she wants to bulldoze the slum.
Yes, like in Skippy, she's like, let's get rid of these slums.
Like Skippy, yeah.
And
it turns out it's because...
The thing is, she feels the people aren't the problem. She was treated cruelly by the poor kids, but she doesn't blame the kids. She blames the upbringing. Yeah. She blames the slum. She wants to bulldoze it.
You need to bulldoze it and build something nice.
She has plans. Instead. She has one of those 80s
kind of like what Joe said.
Things where she has she has a model of the mall they're going to build there.
New Detroit.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And so, but she comes in there. She brings in the bulldozers. She's actually starting knocking down stuff, and she says, "I want you to fight Wolf Kaneguchi," and he says, "Okay, I'll agree." If you
send the bulldozers home.
Yeah, so it seems like she's only started the bulldozing to force him into this fight. Or was it just his way of stopping her?
I think the latter.
Okay.
I got the impression it was the latter. She wants to bulldoze them for unrelated reasons. Well, the reason is because she grew up in the slums. I want to return to that. It makes no sense how she grew up in the slums but was also rich. Because we see her walking...
They drop her off in a limo. Or they walk in. She walks in with the rich parents. She's wearing her rich clothes.
In a slum.
Yeah.
And we see her house because we know her house was in the first opening shot of the film. We see some kids being chastised for playing in the front yard of this broken down old house. Then in this scene we find out it was her house. Except she's immaculately dressed in a white and blue kind of dress. Yeah. And yet, how do you live in a slum and yet be rich?
Yeah.
And perfectly dressed and driving around in a limo?
Yeah. Yeah, what is going on here?
It's the laziest, most nonsensical thing.
Yeah.
And it's infuriating because we don't get Dampé's backstory.
No, that's right. We don't get that whole thing in this. We don't get...
His backstory is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why he's so desperate to find a champion boxer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he struck out in the world of boxing. And yet, instead of spending time on that, we get this absolutely crazy image of a immaculately dressed girl sitting in a slum.
Yeah.
And then she gets robbed. And they steal all her expensive possessions, and she's just... And they grind the photo of her and her parents in the dirt. What, so she an orphan?
Yeah, but then her grandfather's running this gym.
So she does have living relatives.
She has a living grandfather that's running a gym.
So it's not like unscrupulous step-parents dumped her like Snow White in the slum. She had...
It's baffling. It's so baffling.
I'm sorry, I've changed my mind about the screenwriter. You fucked up.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been a studio note. Like, we need a backstory.
We need something. When I read Ashita no Joe when I was a kid, I didn't understand why Yoko was so mean.
Yes. Yeah. So we learn at this stage that Rikishi had been stripped of his boxing license because he'd beaten up a reporter or something.
Yeah. Here it was, in the original comic, it was because the reporter had accused him of throwing a fight, or it was a
heckler.
It was a heckler, yeah. Here it's a reporter that was threatening to reveal the secret that Yoko grew up in the slums.
Okay, yeah.
Again, a thing with no stakes.
That's right.
Why would Rikishi care about that?
Yeah. Why would Yoko care?
Why would Yoko care if people knew? Why would Rikishi care that people knew about Yoko? What's his connection to Yoko at this point?
I don't know. Okay, so Joe fights Wolf. Wolf, his hair seemed anachronistic.
Very anachronistic.
It's got like the half mohawk.
Yeah, it's like
cool looking dude. Very cool looking dude. But I was like, is that 1968 hair?
Absolutely
Didn't
not.
think so.
It's like a very 1990s, post 90s.
Yeah.
It's like a faux hawk.
Yeah.
Incidentally, he also yells like an idiot.
Oh right, yes. Yeah.
Because he's meant to be like a wild animal, I suppose.
He's kind of winning, and then Rikishi actually is the one that comes up to the ring and tells Joe to get back up again.
He does that in the manga too.
Okay. Alright, I wasn't sure about that. So now Rikishi, this is the 1 hour point, and this 2 hour 15 minute, he starts training for his fight against Joe.
Yep.
So 1 hour in, we're getting ready.
Yep.
He's got all these heaters on so he can lose weight. He puts himself into solitary confinement, much like in the manga. He locks himself in that storage room.
With a bunch of heaters. He again breaks out of the room.
Yep.
Looking for water.
Yep.
And
The taps are all tied
has
up.
tied up all the taps.
She offers him some hot water. I would say that the kettle did seem very 1968.
Yeah. Unlike Wolf's haircut. Yeah.
Yes, unlike Wolf's haircut. Yeah, but he turns down the water. I think he did this in the manga too, where she offers him water, hot water, so that he doesn't hurt himself by drinking cold water after not having had any water for a very long time.
Yeah, why would that's a very kind of like that's Eastern medicine kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cold water's bad for you.
Yeah, if you haven't had water in a long time. Anyway, he turns it down. He goes back into solitary. This is when Yoko comes to the slum to confront Joe about something at this stage. I can't remember what it was, but she steps on the dandelion.
Yeah.
Symbolically.
Yeah.
I can't remember which.
What is it?
Okay, now comes the weigh-in. Now, okay, so we had the training montage, and we promised we were going to have male physique corner this episode. We're going to do it about Yûsuke Iseya in this scene.
He's so shredded.
Very shredded. Now, I actually saw a couple of things about this. So I saw an interview with Hugh Jackman, and he said they tell you 3 months before when you're going to have the topless day, when they're going to shoot the topless scene.
3 months.
You get 3 months to get ready for it.
3 months.
And then you have 3 days of dehydration. 3 days of dehydration.
Yep.
So that your skin gets thinner and that the veins are popping.
Yep. Definition. Yep.
And then I saw a thing that Channing Tatum said about Magic Mike, and he said he was only able to maintain that body for 5 days. So to get anything done with the shirt off, you have a 5 day window. That's the max he can maintain it. Okay, so I don't know what kind of training regimen this guy went through to get to this muscly, incredible level of fitness.
Yeah.
I think probably they had to shoot this in 1 day, I'm guessing, to this one moment where he's lifting dumbbells.
Yeah. When he's lifting those dumbbells, it's incredible. He looks incredible.
He looks absolutely incredible. Then we get the weigh-in, and I think they must have CGI'd his skinny body onto him.
They did.
Because he's like, you can see the ribs and everything.
He's sort of sucked in his... But yeah, they've overlaid it with some... Because at the fight, he looks basically...
He looks basically all right.
Yeah.
He doesn't look unhealthy. He looks very unhealthy, and people are gasping, and of course...
I read that he... So, as I mentioned... So this isn't... We're not at Hugh Jackman level.
No.
Because this is Japan in 2010.
It's not bulk. It's like he's like lean.
But I mean, I don't think it's as extreme.
Yeah.
I think maybe Iseya might have been already been in pretty good shape.
Okay, yeah, sure. He'd have to be.
But he certainly went through some kind of extreme weight loss, muscle building technique, because I read that when they shot the scene where Yoko offers him water, he was in the middle of a fast.
Right.
At that point. Which is why he looks so kind of like rough.
Right.
I mean, he's legitimately struggling.
Yeah.
But also, I don't think they're going to the Hollywood extremes.
No.
Because, first of all, I don't think Japan has that kind of industry.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's on record that Yamashita, the guy that played Joe, he spent a month.
Yeah.
Like, and he looks incredible.
Yeah.
But he doesn't look insane.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. This guy went through it for sure. So at an hour and 30 minutes, we get the big fight. I was surprised. I was like, there's still 45 minutes in this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a long fight.
Yeah.
Gratuitous slow motion.
Yes.
A lot of slow motion.
Yes. I think there's probably Rocky levels.
Yeah, definitely.
Slow mo.
And we get the shot that we get quite a few of those shots that you always get. Someone being punched in the face in slow mo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raging Bull did it.
Yes.
Everyone since has done it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the mouth guard will come flying out.
Yeah.
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 We get a scene where Joe, again, another one of these scenes that humanizes Joe. Is humanize the right word? Softens his character, certainly. We get a scene where he talks about how angry he is. I was so angry. I blamed society.
Yes.
Just stuff like Joe never says anything like that in the manga. But here in the film, we got a...
But he does talk about his burning, which shouldn't really be talking about until 18 volumes from now.
There's no Mendoza or anything like that in this, so we just have to... It makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, Rikishi is the most important other... Aside from Yoko, Rikishi is kind of like the other most important character in the series, so it makes kind of sense to swap this.
Yes, absolutely. But the reason it surprised me was because I had a hunch, because I knew this is... Looking at the video on YouTube before I actually sat down and watched it, I knew it was going to end sort of with the Rikishi match. I was like, maybe they were hoping for a trilogy. So that's why I was like, seems strange to put the burning to ash in the first. But again, maybe they could come back to it in the third movie.
Why not? He's not burned out yet, so he can just say it over and over.
Yes, that's right.
You're right, because of course, I mean, in this film, he doesn't die at the end. Yeah. It just ends with him...
Because it only goes up to volume 8. It doesn't go up to...
That's it. So they might have wanted more films. You're right. But here, we get this kind of boxing as redemption. Yeah. Which is, I think, really kind of... Unlike Rocky, in the manga, Joe is not really redeemed by boxing. He's obsessed by it.
He finds a purpose. It's not
but his purpose doesn't make him a better person.
No, it's just the purpose is fighting. I live to fight, he says.
Compare the end of Rocky where, sure, Rocky loses, but he stopped being a mob enforcer and he tells Adrian he loves her. Yeah. Joe doesn't tell Yoko he loves her. Yeah. He gives her his boxing gloves and that's it. Yeah. Yeah. And he dies. Yeah. He doesn't quit. I mean, Joe never... So, Joe is not redeemed... It's not that traditional story of sport redeeming an immoral person. Right. On the film, although, they don't trust us to be interested in Joe unless he becomes a better person. Yeah. So we have this little speech in the middle of the fight where he says, I was so angry, I blamed society. Society was wrong, but I've learned now, boxing has taught me how to, productively channel my rage.
There's two other things that also happen in Western sports stories. One is... that the parent does not want the kid to be on the rowing team, but at the end the kid rows and wins and the parent was at the rowing.
They come around.
They come around and then they have a big hug. Yes. And the other thing is the main character will quit the rowing team before the third act and then has to come back onto the team. Yes. Without having any training for a month or whatever, and then win the big match at the end. And none of those things happen in Ashita.
No. Okay,
so basically Rikishi hits his head on the rope.
Yeah, just like the manga. Yep.
Just like in the manga. And he manages to knock out Joe, as in the manga. We get a voiceover at this stage, which we have not had for an hour and 45 minutes. We get a voiceover from Rikishi saying, it's all over. Which, if you've read the manga, you know what that means. He means including his own life. Yeah. Not just the match. Not just this years of build-up to this moment. It's also his own life is also over. He goes in for the hand... Joe gets up, goes in for the handshake with Rikishi, but Rikishi, as he leans in, falls over on his face.
Same as manga again. Yeah. And then he's died. Unlike the manga, we don't have that scene where Joe's back in his room and the reporters break the news. Instead, we sort of have more slow motion. Rikishi being carried to, I guess, his room.
Yeah, his change room.
And then we see Joe running after him.
Yes, why does he have to run? Those guys are walking with a stretcher.
Yes, I was thinking that. I was thinking, where were you? What were you doing that you need to rush to follow? Because it's dramatic.
It is dramatic, and I have to say, when we've got Rikishi dead and Joe is there screaming his name, it got me, man. It really did get me.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I wrote... I guess I don't know. I guess I'm all dry, dead inside. Because I wrote, why is Joe's relationship with the guy he barely knows more important than that of his coach, his friends, his trainers?
That's true. Every relationship is a movie. Like the Danpei-Joe relationship. Every relationship was like, why, what's that connection?
Yeah.
I actually, no. You know what? I thought about this a lot watching the movie. Because the fact is, they do have a very intense relationship because those guys, we had the training montages.
Yeah.
They are thinking about each other all the time, non-stop. That's what was going through my head as I was watching those montages of the alternate training guys. He's thinking about him. They are absolutely thinking about each other non-stop, and I felt that he had a deep respect for him, and I think that's why that scene got me.
Fair enough. In the manga, we get hundreds of pages.
Yes.
But, why not? You're right. We do get plenty of scenes, and everyone else's relationship is missing. Yes. So what else are we going to latch on?
They don't say it out loud. It was the way my brain was processing those moments.
That's fair. So then we get a scene with Yoko where she says she's not going to demolish the slum after all.
Yes.
A victory for diphtheria and dysentery, I guess.
But also she has Rikishi's gloves, which Rikishi in his dying moments had given to her to give to Joe.
Yep.
Joe turns them down.
Yeah.
He disappears.
For a year.
Is it a year?
Yeah, it's a year.
Okay.
And then Yoko is visiting Rikishi's grave, and she sees a dandelion there, which means Joe's back. And then everyone's thrilled to see Joe back. He shows up at the gym. Everyone's thrilled.
Well, first the paper airplane flies in.
Oh, yeah, of course, the symbol.
And they're like,
because one symbol's not enough. A dandelion is not enough. We need to have this paper airplane.
What is dandelion the symbol of exactly? I'm not sure.
Well, it's him, isn't it?
It's the bridge and Rikishi.
The dandelion's Joe.
Then what did her stepping on it symbolize? Why is Joe the dandelion at the grave of Rikishi?
Because it's just to show that he's back, right?
Yeah, I know that. That's a literal reason, but what's a symbolic reason if the dandelion?
Well, I just thought because he is the dandelion, the fact that it's there means he's there too.
Okay.
But the thing is, we get two symbols. We get both the newspaper and the dandelion. Yeah. I think one would be enough.
Yeah.
And then he shows up in the gym, and everyone's overjoyed to see him. Nishi, Danpei, and the kids. He's been away for a year. The last time they saw him, he killed a man. But, they're very happy he's back.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, we keep saying he killed a man, but really this man had starved himself to an extreme, and, I don't know. But he's there, and he goes into the gym, and then there's kind of like he has a vision of Rikishi in the ring.
Yep.
Like almost like the ghost of Rikishi inviting him in with their arm gesture to come. And I like that moment too.
Yeah, that was cool.
I really liked that bit because then he gets in the ring and he's not there, of course. It's just an empty ring. But
and then roll credits.
But I did
like that
bit
too.
Yeah.
I like that as well. It was really cool. And in fact, it makes sense because in those after Volume 8, Rikishi is always present.
Yeah.
It's often the thing that he's either hindering Joe's boxing or helping it. It's often the thing that'll snap him out of a funk thinking about Rikishi.
Right.
He's able to beat the South Korean robot guy because he thinks about Rikishi. Yeah. No, I liked that too.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay, do you have any trivia about this movie?
Certainly. I have no idea how much it cost to make.
Okay.
But it made 1.1 billion yen in 2011. So it was released on February the 11th, 2011.
Okay.
Filmed the previous year from around March to June.
Okay.
With that box, it made almost nothing overseas. I think perhaps the filmmakers were hoping that attaching Yamashita as Joe Yabuki, this would have an appeal in overseas
Korea or China.
Yeah,
or something
places like
that.
Korea and China, but it doesn't seem to have done so. That figure of 1.1 billion, which is about 14 million US, meant that it was 31st out of Japanese movies released in the Japanese box office in 2011. For the film that was the most profitable that year, they were all Hollywood films, was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was the most profitable film, made something like 9.9 billion yen, so about almost 10 times as much. So I don't know if it was a huge success. If you're interested in a list of a couple of the films that beat it, in terms of box office take, Crayon Shin-chan, 3 Kamen Rider movies.
Whoa! Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. Red.
Okay.
Which also came out in 2011, which one day we'll cover.
Okay, yeah.
And 2 Gantz films.
Oh, okay. We might cover those as well.
Indeed we might.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I mentioned, Yamashita lost 10 kilos apparently in order to play the role. I believe that he's not in as an amazing shape as Iseya, but he's still in pretty good shape. Yeah. And I believe that they could be boxers.
Yeah, absolutely.
In
that weight class, I mean, he looked like Ashita no Joe in the manga.
For sure.
Yeah.
And they clearly took boxing lessons because they were throwing convincing punches a lot of the time. Yeah. Unlike Joe Palooka movies that we covered in the last couple of weeks. I was actually impressed by Teruyuki Kagawa, who played Danpei. I thought he threw some wicked punches.
Yeah. Yeah.
As Yûsuke Iseya, who played Rikishi, he actually won an acting award for this role. He won Best Supporting Actor at the Blue Ribbon Awards, which is a film award in Japan, awarded by film journalists, for this film and also for another film called Kaiji 2, which came out the same year. Kaiji 2, incidentally, based on a manga. About a gambler. This Kaiji 2 specifically is about pachinko. Oh. And if you're interested to know who was the lead that Iseya was playing alongside, Tetsuya Fujiwara, who played Yagami Light. Oh, right, okay. In the Death Note movies.
I can almost guarantee we don't have the Pachinko manga in English, probably not the movie either.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Because Teruyuki Kagawa, who played Danpei, also had a recurring role in those kaiji movies, of which there have been 3. Right, yep. I believe it. On the other hand, Yûsuke Iseya, Rikishi, plays Jotaro Kuzo.
I saw that!
Diamond is Unbreakable.
We're going to be doing that one 100%.
Hell yeah, we're going to be doing it.
Yes. I saw that his name was in the credits. I was like, which character is going to play? And he's actually fucking Jotaro. I was like, what? What are we talking about here? Okay.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
A word about punch-drunk syndrome.
Yeah.
Also, as I mentioned, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. As if we needed another reason to dislike sport. It's rife in contact sports. Yeah. If you're playing a contact sport, you have a very good chance of developing this particular disorder. Undiagnosable while you're alive. Right. It can only be diagnosed by autopsy. Whoa. And there is no cure, of course, and treatments are not very effective. Holy cow. The very first female athlete ever to be diagnosed with this condition. Post-mortem, yes. Heather Anderson, who is an Australian rules football player in the Women's League. She played Aussie rules football and rugby at a high level from 15 years of age. She played 1 season in the AFLW in 2017. She played 8 matches. Okay. She was delisted in 2018 after injuring her shoulder. Killed herself in 2022. Whoa. At the age of 28. Okay. Her family donated her brain to the Australian Sports Brain Bank, which is specifically set up to study these conditions.
That's something at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
Don't watch sport.
Yeah.
Read Ashita no Joe.
Yes! That's right. No real humans were harmed in the making of this comic.
Alright, let's do our votes.
Yes. Okay, this manga was amazing. Now, I skipped through. I read the first 3, I read 8, I read 20, so I didn't have to go through the Bloodsport chapters, which might have lowered my rating of it. But again, I just could not believe the level of cartooning I was looking at, especially by volume 20. I was like, how is this happening? Just completely amazing. A page turner.
Yeah.
A chapter turner.
Yeah, absolutely. I pulled several late nights this week in order to read all 20 volumes. Yeah. I just kept putting off watching the film because I just couldn't stop reading it. And it's interesting. It's a testament to kind of the quality of the writing and the quality of the art, because on the surface there's little to recommend the character of Joe and his story to you. As I mentioned, like he has no arc aside from the fact that from very early on he gains a purpose that he wants to box, and he wants to box challenging opponents.
But it's initially only for revenge against Rikishi, because when he first takes up boxing, it's just to get money at a down pay.
Yeah, and the only thing that fires him up is boxing someone that's pissed him off personally in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
He doesn't want titles, money, fame. He just wants to fight people that have wronged him, it seems. Despite the fact that this manga is called Tomorrow's Joe, it doesn't really seem to be about planning for the future or bettering yourself. Yeah. It's really just story after story about Joe fighting people that he doesn't like.
Yeah.
In a sports story, often the sport is an analogy for life. If you thrive in the sport, you are thriving in life. You've become a better person. We like to project morality, onto sports people, right? Sportsmanship, it's a term. We like to imagine that sports people or can be moral paragons, right? But Joe is decidedly not one. So why do I like it so much?
Yeah.
This manga is about people beating the shit out of one another, and no one is redeemed, and the people involved are seldomly good sports.
Maybe it's the single-mindedness of it. I don't know. It's so compelling.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've written down, it's well written above all.
Yeah.
We imbue sports people and sports with virtues, but Joe has few virtues save determination. Joe is boxing stripped of illusions. There's something compelling about that. Joe has no life beyond boxing and dies in the ring. And you find it hard to look away.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, how'd you feel about this movie?
It's probably a no for me. The guys are in great shape. There's some good sets and costumes. Yeah. It's not on the level of A Distant Neighborhood.
You know what? It's also not on the level of Godzilla Minus Zero, which we just had a year or two back, which was set in the 40s and really recreated that era in an amazing way. But, why should we hold it up to that standard? I think it's good enough in that respect for that.
Yeah, those parts are fine. Why else do I like it? Everything's a bit rushed, again, as I said. A lot of the relationships feel forced. It doesn't make sense why these people's lives become entangled.
Yes, you have to fill in the blanks. It's missing the emotional charge of the comic.
Yep.
You don't ever feel like Get Up Joe. Like, in the comic, you're amazed that he's getting up. It's a piece of fiction, and I was like, he's getting up. Yeah. I can't believe he's getting up. Yeah. Somebody just fucking wrote this with a pen.
Yeah, exactly. I keep saying
Somebody just wrote it down.
I keep saying that.
Anybody could write this down. Joe gets up.
The writer's right. Joe gets up. And then a guy draws it.
And I was losing my mind. I was like, he's getting up. I can't believe he's getting up. I never got to that level with the movie. Indeed and I think there's somehow the shorthand that they... And it's inevitable. It also raises the question of why try to make Ashita no Joe into a movie. Can you do it?
We'll talk about that when we get to adaptation. But otherwise, I would say my other big problem is these subplots that don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
The mafia boss who serves no purpose.
I will say, despite your complaints about the CGI, I think the movie looks pretty good. It looks better than those Death Note movies that were shot on high definition video.
Yes.
This is a much better looking movie.
I agree. But they were... I think there's been a bit of a leap in quality between when did those Death Note movies come out? Like 06?
Oh, is
something
that
like that?
Okay.
I think there's like a quantum leap.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's obvious, like when he rips up why do that in CG?
Yeah.
But some other times when they're doing the punches in the face, they're clearly no one's being punched really there. It's like Robert De Niro copping a massive whack in the face in the 80s. Here they've CG'd it, but it looks fine, I agree. I just more feel that when they were frozen there, And they do it a couple of times. I feel like that kind of takes me out. People don't freeze like that. In a manga, I was on board with it. In an anime, I think I would be fine with it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Live action, you're in trouble.
I feel like I'm reminded.
It's a bit like the no stance pose, like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. Right, which brings us to adaptation.
Yeah.
Oh, what did you think? Yeah or nay for the film?
It's. I'm gonna say nay. But it's not completely negative.
Right.
Like, there's decent stuff in here.
Sure.
It's actually not unwatchable by any means.
It is a bit long.
But let's get to adaptation because I do have a question. Like, I wonder if you hadn't read the manga, would you have a different reaction to it? Would you like it more? And I actually wonder who the audience for this is in Japan, because in Japan, everybody knows what's supposed to happen in Ashita no Joe. So my question is, would they just go in and be like, they automatically know the background, so it doesn't matter, or are they going to be more upset that all those arcs are missing?
Yeah. Well, I feel, we feel the exact same way, because that's my question about this as well. I've written down, why does this film exist?
Yes.
Why does it exist?
Try to adapt this into... I can't imagine what the 84-minute version is like.
Well, it came out, as you said, before the show was even finished.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but 50 years after Joe came out, after two anime series, we make this film in 2011. Why is it made?
You know what? It reminds me of all the live-action Disney movies we're getting. Yeah. All the remakes of Snow White, Little Mermaid, Lion King, all the full CG versions of those movies. Why? Why do they just... Because you need product for your streaming service and kids don't like animation anymore, maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it feels like that. Like, it's been 30 years since we've had an iteration of Ashita no Joe, a product. We need another Ashita no Joe product. Here it is.
Wow. We are absolutely on the same page here. I remember last year, I think, I talked about adaptations. We talk about adaptations every week. But I talked about kind of like two poles in an adaptation. The pole of sameness and the pole of difference. You have to have some difference in any adaptation, and you have to have some sameness, or it's not an adaptation. And you said there needs to be a third pole, money.
Yeah.
And at the time I thought, no, I'm happy with my dichotomy. But boy, this film exists because of money.
Yeah.
There people who are fans of people who know about Ashita no Joe, people who are fans of Ashita no Joe will go and see a live action film of Ashita no Joe, and it really just seems to exist to get people in a cinema and spend their money and see a heartthrob idol boxing with Yûsuke Iseya, my new man crush.
Yeah.
So so that's a nay for me.
But I would say once you get to my age, you don't go see those movies because you're like, I've read the book of that. I don't need to see the movie of it. I'll read the book again.
Yeah, that's why it's like, who's the audience here?
Yes.
Right? Everyone that, like my mate Yuichi said, everyone that really cares about Tomorrow's Joe are all old and grew up at a time when poverty was a big thing in Japan.
Yeah.
So who's the audience in 2011 where there is almost where you can't find a slum in modern Tokyo?
Yeah.
You can only find pretend slums like,
it's just like edges. There's like cheap housing like right next to the railroad tracks or something like that. It's not like, I don't know if there's a central area, like it's not like Mumbai where it's just like the one giant area.
So, like they're remaking Ashita no Joe at the moment with a robot Joe. It's called like Megalo something or other.
Okay.
It's like an anime.
Right.
Where Joe is a robot now.
Okay.
I guess it's kind of like Battle Angel Alita or something. He's like a cheap robot and he needs to fight the expensive robots.
Huh.
I didn't look into it at all.
Okay.
But that's how you get a new audience.
Yeah.
That's how you, I guess, make... This doesn't feel like art.
Right. Feels like a product. I don't know. I think they kind of tried, but I feel like...
Sure, they tried.
I feel like the higher-ups were like, we have this thing that has stopped making money.
I'm sure there were passionate people involved who did their best. Yeah. And I know that there were times when they tried to do something different. But you watch it and it does... You really hit it on the head. It feels like a product. It doesn't feel like passionate, like someone was trying to make a vision. They really wanted to make their Tomorrow's Joe film. They had an idea of a way that it could look in cinema. No.
Yeah.
Let's just package this and send it out.
Yeah. Okay. Please like, rate, review, subscribe on whatever your platform is. Please leave us a comment on our Facebook group or our Instagram or our Blue Sky. All those links are in the show notes. By the way, we received a review a couple of weeks ago on Apple Podcasts from Ty Lele. The review said it's 5 stars. It's titled A++, and it says, extremely underrated podcast. The selections fill a perfect niche and separate it from the rest. I'm in love. Thank you for that very nice comment, Ty Lele.
Thank you. It's big news when we get a review of it.
Yeah, it's the first one in 6 months, I think. Now, there's only 2 on there, but they're both 5 stars.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so please leave those reviews. I think Apple Podcasts is the place you're supposed to leave them for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway. Please join our Patreon at patreon.com/comicbookmovieoblivion, all one word, to help pay for hosting fees and DVDs and books and things like that. Okay, next week we will cover Superman 2.
That's right. In honor of the ongoing mystery that is the passing of Gene Hackman.
Currently it's an ongoing mystery because it happened last night. I think we got the news about him passing away. So we'll definitely read Adventure Comics number 283 from April 1961. It was the first Zod and Phantom
The appearance of General Zod?
I believe, I think that's the first Zod, and maybe 1 or 2 other Phantom Zone stories. Nobody's following along. We'll just post them next week. You'll figure it out.
Brilliant.
We're only going to do the theatrical, or are we going to try to do both in one episode, or how are we going to handle the Donner cut?
Well, we'll have to tune in next week to find out. Did you find yourself randomly shadowboxing while reading the... You're more mature than I am.
I think so.
Just, reading the postcards and just like, jab, jab, straight.
Okay.
This comic, I can't wait to talk about it.
All right.